Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something we all do, but probably don't appreciate enough. Sleep.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's one of those things that seems so simple, but well, it turns out it's way more complex than we might think.
Right. Like, we spend about a third of our lives doing it, but most of us probably couldn't really tell you why. I mean, sure, we know we feel better after a good night's sleep, but what's actually happening in our brains and bodies during those hours? That's what we're going to explore today.
For sure.
Our guide for this journey, Why We Sleep, by Matthew Walker.
This book really blew my mind, gotta say. So much I just never even considered about sleep.
Me too. It totally changed the way I think about those nighttime hours.
Yeah.
Seriously, this book should come with a warning label. Prepare to have your mind blown.
For real.
And a good place to start, I think, is with this kind of shocking stat that Walker throws out there right at the beginning. Get this. Two-thirds of adults in developed countries are not getting enough sleep.
It's a crazy number, right? Like, if we're talking about any other essential thing for our health, that would be a major public health crisis.
Exactly. It's like this silent epidemic of sleep deprivation, and most people don't even realize they're part of it. Think about it. If two-thirds of us were walking around with, I don't know, a vitamin deficiency, there would be public service announcements everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Like a,
Yeah.
a national campaign to, get everyone taking their sleep supplements or something.
Totally. But with sleep, it's almost like we wear our sleep deprivation as a badge of honor. Like, oh, I only got 4 hours last night. I'm so busy and productive.
Yeah, it's almost a bragging, right? It's like the more sleep deprived you are, the more successful you must be.
Right. But Walker flips that script entirely. He shows us just how detrimental this lack of sleep is to our health, our well-being, our everything. I mean, we're talking about some serious consequences here.
Yeah, no kidding. We're not just talking about feeling a little groggy. We're talking about increased risk of heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancer even.
It's a pretty scary list. I have to
Yeah.
admit, before reading this book, I was kind of in that camp of like, oh yeah, sleep is important, but I didn't really connect it to those major health problems.
Right, it's easy to think of it as something separate, like, oh, those are health issues, and then sleep is over here.
Totally. But Walker really drives home the point that it's all connected. Our sleep is foundational to our overall health and well-being.
Absolutely. It's like the foundation of a house. If the foundation is crumbling, the whole structure is at risk.
Okay, so we've established that not getting enough sleep is bad for us, like really bad. But before we dive into all the scary consequences, I'm kind of curious about the big why.
Yeah, the why.
Like, why do we sleep in the first place?
Yes.
It seems so counterintuitive from an evolutionary perspective.
Yeah, totally. Think about it. You're lying there, unconscious, vulnerable. You can't find food. You can't defend yourself from predators. It seems like a terrible survival strategy.
Right. I mean, imagine if our ancestors were just snoozing all the time while saber-toothed tigers were roaming around.
Exactly. So there has to be a really good reason why this behavior, this need for sleep, evolved and persisted in almost every species on Earth.
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher.
Yeah.
And for a long time, scientists were pretty stumped. In fact, Walker talks about how, for centuries, sleep was viewed as this passive state, almost like the brain was just shutting down for the night.
Right, like a computer going into sleep mode, just kind of idling.
Exactly. But now, thanks to advances in brain imaging and other technologies, we're getting a much clearer picture of what's actually happening in the brain during sleep. And it turns out it's anything but passive.
Yeah, the brain is actually really active during sleep. It's a hive of activity, processing information, consolidating memories, clearing out toxins, all kinds of important stuff.
And that's where Matthew Walker comes in. I mean, this guy is like the rock star of sleep science.
Oh, yeah, he's a total sleep guru. And what's cool is that he didn't start out obsessed with sleep. He actually calls himself an accidental sleep researcher. He kind of stumbled into the field and then became totally captivated by it.
And thank goodness he did. His research has been groundbreaking, revealing just how crucial sleep is for our health, our minds, our everything.
For sure. And in his book, he lays it all out in a way that's both fascinating and kind of terrifying at the same time.
Right, like you'll never look at sleep the same way again. But in a good way, I promise. So, are you ready to dive into the mysteries of the sleeping brain?
Definitely. Let's do it.
I think we should start by talking about some of the things that can go wrong with sleep, like sleep disorders. I mean, we all know how it feels to have a bad night's sleep every now and then.
Yeah.
But for some people, it's a chronic problem.
Yeah, definitely. Sleep disorders are way more common than most people realize, and they can have a really significant impact on people's lives. It's not just about feeling tired, it's about um, affecting their mood, their concentration, their work, their relationships, everything really.
Right. It's like this ripple effect that touches every aspect of their life. And I think one of the most common, or at least most talked about sleep disorders is insomnia.
Oh yeah, for sure. Insomnia is it's pretty widespread and it can be really tough to deal with. It's that feeling of just lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to fall asleep or waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to get back to sleep.
Ugh, I've been there. It's like torture. Your mind just won't shut off, and you know you need to sleep, but you just can't. And then the more you worry about it, the worse it gets.
Exactly. It's like this vicious cycle. And it's not just the lack of sleep itself, it's the anxiety and frustration that
Hmm.
comes with it. The constant worry about not being able to sleep, which then makes it even harder to fall asleep.
It's like your own brain is working against you. And Walker talks about how we tend to think of insomnia as a symptom of something else, like stress or anxiety or maybe a medical condition. But he argues that for a lot of people, insomnia is the primary problem.
Right. Like it's not just a side effect, it's the main issue that needs to be addressed. And that's where therapies like CBTI come in. Yeah, it stands for cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And it's basically a way of retraining your brain to sleep better.
Okay, so it's like therapy, but specifically for sleep problems.
Hmm.
That's interesting. What does it involve exactly?
Well, it involves a lot of different techniques like establishing a regular sleep schedule, creating a relaxing bedtime routine, and challenging those negative thoughts and beliefs about sleep that we were talking about earlier. It's basically about addressing both the behavioral and the cognitive aspects of insomnia.
So it's not just about like changing your habits, it's also about changing your mindset around sleep.
Right, exactly. It's about understanding the thoughts and behaviors that are contributing to your insomnia and then learning how to modify them. And it's been shown to be really effective, actually. Studies have shown that CBTI can be just as effective as sleeping pills, if not more so, in the long term.
Really? That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when they're struggling with insomnia, they just reach for the sleeping pills. But what does Walker have to say about those? Are they really a good solution?
He's pretty cautious about sleeping pills, to be honest. He sees them as more of a Band-Aid solution, not a long-term fix. He argues that they don't actually induce natural sleep. They kind of just sedate you, which isn't the same thing.
That's interesting. So you might be unconscious, but your brain isn't really going through the same restorative processes that it would during natural sleep.
Right, exactly. And while they might help you fall asleep in the short term, they can actually interfere with the quality of your sleep. So you might wake up feeling groggy and unrefreshed,
Oh.
even if you technically got enough hours of sleep.
And he also talks about some pretty scary potential side effects, right? Like increased risk of cancer and memory problems.
Yeah, there's definitely some concerning research out there about the long-term effects of sleeping pills.
It makes you think twice about popping those pills, that's for sure.
Mhm.
I guess it's always better to try to address the root of the problem rather than just masking the symptoms.
Absolutely, and that's why therapies like CBTI are so promising. They're actually getting at the underlying causes of insomnia rather than just providing a temporary fix.
So we've talked about insomnia, which is probably the most well-known sleep disorder. But what about some of the lesser-known ones, like narcolepsy? What is that exactly, and how is it different from just feeling sleepy during the day?
So, narcolepsy is a neurological disorder that affects the brain's ability to regulate the sleep-wake cycle. It's basically like your brain gets the signals for sleep and wakefulness all mixed up.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about feeling tired. It's about your brain actually sending the wrong signals.
Right. And it can lead to some pretty strange and debilitating symptoms like excessive daytime sleepiness, of course,
Yeah.
but also things like sleep attacks where people just suddenly fall asleep without any warning.
Oh, that sounds terrifying. Like imagine just conking out in the middle of a conversation or something.
Yeah, it can happen anywhere, anytime. And it can be really dangerous, obviously, if it happens while someone is driving or operating machinery.
Absolutely. I
Mhm.
mean, it's like your body just decides to take a nap, whether you want to or not. Exactly. And then there are other symptoms like cataplexy, which is a sudden loss of muscle control, often triggered by strong emotions. So you could be laughing or excited about something and just suddenly collapse.
Yeah, it can be anything from a slight weakness in the knees to a complete collapse. And it's thought to be related to the intrusion of REM sleep into wakefulness. Like some of the features of REM sleep, like muscle paralysis, are happening while the person is still awake.
Wow, that's wild. Our brains are so strange and complex. And narcolepsy is a perfect example of how much we still don't understand about sleep and how it's regulated. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about some of the benefits of sleep, specifically how it impacts our cognitive abilities, like our memory and learning. I mean, we all know that we feel sharper after a good night's sleep, but what's actually going on in our brains?
Well, Walker talks about how sleep is essential for consolidating and strengthening the memories we form during the day. It's like, think of your brain as a computer. During the day, you're taking in all this information, all these experiences, and your brain is temporarily storing them in its short-term memory, like the RAM of a computer.
Okay, I'm following so far. So short-term memory is like the RAM, constantly taking in new information.
Right. But that information is only temporary. If you want to remember it for the long term, you need to transfer it to your hard drive, which in this analogy is your long-term memory. And that's where sleep comes in. During sleep, particularly during deep sleep, your brain is busy transferring those memories from short-term to long-term storage.
So if we're not getting enough sleep, are we basically losing those memories? Like our brains are forgetting to hit the save button.
In a way, yeah. Walker cites studies showing that students who are sleep deprived perform worse on tests, they have more difficulty remembering information, they struggle to focus, their reaction times are slower, they're just not as sharp. It's like their brains are running on fumes.
And it's not just about academic performance, right? I mean, this affects our ability to learn new skills too, like playing a musical instrument or learning a new language.
Absolutely. Sleep is crucial for all kinds of learning and skill development. Walker describes a study where participants were taught a finger tapping task. Those who got a good night's sleep showed significant improvement in their performance the next day, while those who were sleep deprived didn't improve nearly as much. It was like their brains weren't able to consolidate the motor skills they had learned.
So it's not just about remembering facts and figures, it's about actually improving our abilities.
Exactly. And that's why sleep is so important for athletes, musicians, artists, anyone who's trying to master a skill. Sleep is like a secret weapon for enhancing performance.
And speaking of growth and development, Walker also talks about how sleep, or lack thereof, impacts physical development, particularly in children and teenagers. What's going on there?
Yeah, this is a really important point, especially for parents and educators to understand. During sleep, our bodies release growth hormone, which is essential for, well, growth, building bones and muscles and all that. And sleep is also crucial for brain development, particularly during adolescence when the brain is undergoing all these major changes.
So those teenage sleep-ins aren't just laziness, they're actually serving a biological purpose.
Exactly. Teenagers need more sleep than adults, around 8–10 hours per night. But unfortunately, a lot of teenagers are chronically sleep deprived, with early school start times and homework and all the social pressures. And the sleep deprivation can have some pretty serious consequences, not just for their academic performance, but also for their physical and mental health.
Like what kinds of consequences are we talking about here?
Well, studies have linked teenage sleep deprivation to an increased risk of obesity, depression, anxiety, even suicidal thoughts. It's pretty scary stuff.
It is. And it makes you wonder if we're setting them up for failure by not prioritizing their sleep needs.
Yeah.
I mean, their brains and bodies are still developing. They need that extra rest.
They absolutely do. And Walker is a big advocate for later school start times for teenagers. He argues that it's more in line with their natural sleep-wake cycles and that it could have huge benefits for their health and well-being.
It makes sense to me. I mean, I remember being a teenager, and those early mornings were brutal. I could barely function before noon.
Exactly. It's like we're asking them to operate at their peak capacity when their brains are still half asleep.
So we've talked about how sleep deprivation affects teenagers. But let's zoom back out to the bigger picture of adults and all the ways that lack of sleep impacts our physical health. Walker paints a pretty bleak picture, right? It's not just about feeling tired. It's about, like, messing with our hormones, our metabolism, our immune system, everything.
Yeah, it's pretty wild how far-reaching the effects are. One of the first things he talks about is how sleep deprivation messes with our metabolism. When we don't get enough sleep, our bodies become less efficient at processing glucose, which can lead to insulin resistance and an increased risk of type 2 diabetes.
So it's like our bodies are losing their ability to regulate blood sugar.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. Sleep deprivation also messes with the balance of hormones that regulate our appetite. Ghrelin, the hormone that makes us feel hungry, goes up, and leptin, the hormone that signals fullness, goes down. It's basically a recipe for overeating and weight gain.
Oh, that's interesting. So not only are we more likely to crave sugary, fatty foods when we're tired, but we're also less likely to feel full after eating them. It's like a double whammy.
It is. And the hormonal havoc doesn't stop there. Sleep deprivation can also lead to a decrease in testosterone levels in men and disrupt the menstrual cycle in women. It's like our bodies are just out of whack when we're not getting enough sleep.
Okay, so we're talking about some pretty serious metabolic and hormonal consequences. But what about our cardiovascular health? Does sleep deprivation impact our hearts?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Walker describes how sleep deprivation increases blood pressure and heart rate, putting extra strain on the cardiovascular system. It also increases levels of inflammation in the body, which is a major risk factor for heart disease.
It's like we're slowly damaging our hearts every time we skimp on sleep.
And the damage isn't just limited to our hearts. Sleep deprivation also weakens our immune system, making us more susceptible to infections and even increasing our risk of developing cancer.
Wait, really? I knew sleep was important for fighting off colds and flu, but I didn't realize it had such a profound impact on our overall immune function.
It does. Walker explains that sleep deprivation disrupts the production of immune cells and antibodies, leaving us more vulnerable to pathogens. He cites studies showing that people who are chronically sleep deprived are more likely to get sick and take longer to recover from illnesses.
It's like our bodies are constantly battling invaders, and sleep is our best defense.
Exactly, and it highlights just how crucial sleep is for maintaining our overall health and well-being. We often think of sleep as a luxury, but it's really a necessity, just like eating a healthy diet and getting regular exercise.
It's like the foundation of a healthy life.
Yeah.
And speaking of foundations, Walker also talks about how sleep deprivation affects our mental health, particularly our mood and emotional well-being. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. This is an area where the link between sleep and health is particularly strong. Walker describes how sleep deprivation throws off the balance of neurochemicals in the brain, leading to all sorts of problems like mood swings, irritability, anxiety, and even depression.
So it's not just about feeling grumpy. It's about actually altering our brain chemistry in ways that can have serious consequences for our mental health.
Exactly. Walker cites studies showing that people who are chronically sleep deprived are more likely to experience symptoms of depression and anxiety. They're also more likely to engage in risky behaviors like substance abuse and impulsive decision making. It's like sleep deprivation is hijacking their brains, making them more vulnerable to negative thoughts and behaviors.
It's a really powerful way to put it. And it just underscores the importance of prioritizing sleep, not just for our physical health, but for our mental well-being as well.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground here, from the science of sleep stages to the really devastating consequences of sleep deprivation. But before we move on to potential solutions, I'm curious about one more thing: dreams. We touched on them briefly earlier, but I'd love to dive deeper into this mysterious and often overlooked aspect of sleep.
Yeah, dreams are fascinating. They've captivated humans for centuries, inspiring art, literature, and even scientific discoveries. But for a long time, they were shrouded in mystery, often viewed through the lens of Freudian psychoanalysis as, windows into our subconscious desires and repressed emotions. Right. That classic interpretation of dreams as wish fulfillment. But Walker offers a very different perspective, arguing that dreams serve a much broader purpose. Can you tell us more about his view?
Well, Walker sees dreams as a kind of nightly therapy session, a way for our brains to process emotions, consolidate memories, and even rehearse social skills. He describes them as a virtual reality simulator, where our brains can safely play out different scenarios and learn from those experiences.
That's a really cool concept. So, like, our brains are running simulations while we sleep, helping us prepare for real-life challenges.
Exactly. And he talks about this process called emotional distillation, where our brains essentially strip away the emotional intensity of our memories during REM sleep. He compares it to watching a movie. The first time you watch it, you might be on the edge of your seat, totally caught up in the emotional roller coaster. But if you watch it again a few days later, the emotional impact is lessened. You're still engaged, but the emotions are less raw.
So, like, our brains are helping us distance ourselves from painful or traumatic experiences.
Exactly. And this emotional processing during REM sleep is crucial for our mental health. Walker cites studies showing that people who are sleep deprived, particularly REM sleep deprived, are more likely to experience anxiety, depression, and PTSD.
It's like our brains need that time to process and integrate our emotional experiences. Without it, we're more likely to be overwhelmed by our feelings.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about processing negative emotions. Dreams also play a role in boosting positive emotions. Walker describes how dreams can help us cultivate feelings of joy, love, and gratitude.
That's beautiful. It's like our dreams are helping us build a more resilient and emotionally balanced inner world.
And that's not all. Walker also talks about how dreams help us improve our social skills. He describes REM sleep as a social simulation, where our brains rehearse different social interactions and learn how to navigate complex social situations.
So it's like our brains are doing social practice while we sleep. That's incredible.
It is, and this social simulation during REM sleep is especially important during adolescence when, social relationships are undergoing major development.
It's like our teenage brains are using dreams to figure out how to navigate the complex world of friendships, romantic relationships, and, all the social hierarchies that come with that stage of life.
Exactly. And this highlights how crucial it is for teenagers to get enough sleep, especially REM sleep. Without it, they might miss out on these really important opportunities for social and emotional development.
Okay, so dreams aren't just these random neural firings. They're actually a vital part of our emotional, social, and even cognitive development. But what about those dreams that are just plain weird or nonsensical? Do those serve a purpose, or are they just our brains having a little fun?
That's a great question. While some dreams might seem bizarre or, completely nonsensical, Walker argues that even those dreams can be meaningful. He describes them as a kind of creative sandbox where our brains can experiment with different ideas and make unexpected connections.
So even the weirdest dreams could be a source of inspiration.
Exactly. Walker gives all these examples of artists, scientists, and inventors who've credited their dreams with sparking major creative breakthroughs. For example, there's the famous story of the chemist Auguste Kekule, who claimed that he discovered the ring-like structure of the benzene molecule after having a dream about a snake biting its own tail.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like our dreams are tapping into this deeper well of creativity that's not always accessible to our conscious minds.
Right, and this really highlights the importance of paying attention to our dreams, even the ones that seem strange or nonsensical. They might hold valuable insights or spark some unexpected creative ideas.
This has been such a fascinating exploration of the world of sleep and dreams. We've learned about the different stages of sleep, the really devastating consequences of sleep deprivation, and the incredible power of dreams to heal, restore, and even inspire us. But what about solutions? What can we do to improve our sleep and reclaim those precious nighttime hours?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll be diving into in the next part. While the consequences of sleep deprivation can be serious, the good news is that we have the power to change our sleep habits and improve our sleep quality.
That's encouraging. I'm definitely ready to learn some practical tips and strategies for getting a better night's sleep.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm ready to learn how to actually get some better sleep. Where do we start? A lot of sleep advice can sound so preachy and unrealistic, like just relax and go to bed early, but I'm hoping for something a little more actionable from Walker's book.
Well, the good news is that Walker doesn't just tell us to sleep more. He actually gives us a whole toolbox of practical strategies, both for individuals and for society as a whole. And he starts with what he calls sleep hygiene, which are basically those everyday habits that can make a big difference in our sleep quality.
Yeah, I've heard that term before, sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
But honestly, it always makes me think of brushing my teeth before bed, which, I do, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee a good night's sleep.
Right. But sleep hygiene is about more than just having a clean bedtime routine. It's really about creating an environment and a mindset that's conducive to sleep. It's about setting the stage for a good night's rest.
Okay, so, what are some of the key elements of good sleep hygiene according to Walker?
Well, one of the most important things is consistency. Walker really stresses the importance of having a regular sleep schedule, going to bed and waking up around the same time each day, even on weekends.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know when my sleep schedule's all over the place, I just feel totally out of whack. But let's be realistic. I mean, for a lot of people with busy and unpredictable lives, sticking to a rigid sleep schedule is a real challenge.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not about being perfectly rigid, Life happens and sometimes you need to stay up late or wake up early. But the key is to try to be as consistent as possible. It really helps regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle, that circadian rhythm we were talking about earlier.
Right, the circadian rhythm. So if we're consistent, it makes it easier for our bodies to know when it's time to wind down and when it's time to wake up.
Exactly. And that circadian rhythm is really influenced by light exposure. That's why Walker also talks about the importance of getting enough natural light during the day, especially in the morning. It helps signal to your body that it's time to be awake and alert.
I've definitely noticed that I feel much more energized when I get some sunlight in the morning, even if it's just for a few minutes.
And then on the flip side, it's important to minimize exposure to artificial light at night, especially blue light, which is emitted from electronic devices like phones and computers.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm definitely guilty of scrolling through my phone in bed. even though I know I should be putting it away. It's just so tempting.
I know. It's a hard habit to break. But that blue light actually suppresses the production of melatonin, which is a hormone that helps regulate our sleep-wake cycle. So even just a quick glance at your phone before bed can mess with your melatonin production and make it harder to fall asleep.
Okay, I'm convinced I'm officially banishing my phone from the bedroom. So, what are some other tips for creating a sleep-friendly environment?
Well, Walker talks about making sure your bedroom is dark, quiet, and cool. He recommends things like blackout curtains to block out any light, a white noise machine or earplugs if you're dealing with noise, and keeping the temperature around 65 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's like we're turning our bedrooms into these sleep sanctuaries. But what about those of us who just can't seem to turn off our racing minds at night? Like, even if the environment is perfect, our thoughts just won't stop. Any advice for quieting those mental chatterboxes?
Yeah, that's a common problem, and that's where relaxation techniques can be really helpful. Walker recommends things like deep breathing exercises, meditation, or progressive muscle relaxation, where you systematically tense and release different muscle groups.
I've tried meditation before, but I always find my mind wandering. It's like my thoughts are monkeys swinging from vine to vine.
It definitely takes practice, but even just a few minutes of mindful breathing can help calm your nervous system and prepare you for sleep. And if meditation isn't your thing, there are so many other relaxation techniques out there. The key is to find something that works for you, something that helps you unwind and de-stress before bed.
Okay, so find what works for you.
Mm.
Got it. And what about exercise? I know it's good for our overall health, but does it have any impact on our sleep?
It definitely does. Regular exercise can really improve sleep quality, but the timing is important. Walker suggests avoiding strenuous exercise too close to bedtime, as it can actually make it harder to fall asleep. So aim to finish your workout at least a few hours before you plan to hit the hay.
Okay, so exercise is good, but not right before bed. Makes sense. What about food and drink? Are there any dietary do's and don'ts when it comes to sleep?
For sure. Walker really emphasizes the importance of avoiding caffeine and alcohol before bed. Caffeine is a stimulant, so it can obviously keep you awake. And while alcohol might make you feel sleepy initially, it actually disrupts your sleep later in the night.
So no nightcaps or late night coffee runs. Are there any foods that actually promote sleep?
Some foods contain tryptophan, which is an amino acid that helps produce melatonin, but things like turkey, chicken, milk, and nuts.
So maybe a turkey sandwich before bed is the secret to a good night's sleep. Okay, I'm definitely feeling empowered to make some changes to my sleep routine. But Walker also talks about the need for some bigger societal changes to address this sleep crisis we're facing. What are some of his recommendations on that front?
Yeah, he's really passionate about advocating for later school start times for teenagers. We talked about how teenagers' brains are wired differently, and those early mornings are really tough for them. He believes that later school start times would be more in line with their natural sleep-wake cycles and could have some really positive effects on their health, well-being, and even their academic performance.
It's crazy to think that we're still operating on a sleep schedule that was designed for, like, an agrarian society, when people went to bed with the sunset and woke up with the sunrise.
Right. Like, our modern world is so different, but we're still clinging to these outdated sleep norms.
Totally. I mean, our lives are just so different now. We have artificial light, we have technology that keeps us connected 24/7, and we have this culture of busyness that often glorifies sleep deprivation.
It's true. And Walker argues that we need to update our sleep culture, recognize that sleep is a fundamental health need, not a luxury or a sign of weakness. He even proposes some pretty radical ideas, like health insurance incentives for good sleep habits.
That's an interesting concept. Like, instead of just treating the consequences of sleep deprivation, we could actually reward people for taking care of their sleep health.
Exactly. It's a real shift in mindset, from viewing sleep as an individual responsibility to recognizing it as a public health priority.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's about creating a society that supports and values sleep, rather than glorifying sleep deprivation and busyness.
And that's really what Walker's book is all about. Changing the conversation about sleep and empowering us to prioritize this absolutely essential aspect of our well-being.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of the power of sleep, and I'm definitely motivated to make some changes in my own life. I mean, who knew that sleep was so crucial for everything from our physical and mental health to our memory, learning, and even our creativity?
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? And the crazy thing is that most of us take it completely for granted. We think of it as this passive activity, something we have to do because our bodies need to recharge. But it's so much more than that.
It really is. It's like this secret superpower that we all have access to, but most of us aren't even using it to its full potential.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of Walker's book. It really opens your eyes to the incredible potential of sleep and how much we can gain from simply prioritizing those nighttime hours.
It's definitely a game changer. And I think the takeaway here is that we need to stop sacrificing sleep and start embracing it as this incredible gift, this opportunity to restore, rejuvenate, and even enhance our lives.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So to everyone listening, I highly recommend checking out Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. It's a fascinating and incredibly important read that will definitely change the way you think about sleep. And maybe, just maybe, it'll inspire you to make some positive changes in your own life. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.